Welcome. And on behalf of MND Australia, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here today at the third MND Connect. So I've been told 170 people have registered, so that's a huge number, and because even though it's only our third MND Connect, it's certainly broken the previous records. Before we begin the proceedings today, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners on the land which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. It is upon their ancestral lands that the University of Sydney is built. As we share our own knowledge, teaching, learning and research practices within the university, may we also pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of this country. I also acknowledge Remembrance Day. So today's 11th of November, as you all know. And in this regard, it is fitting that our first speaker, Lynda Legradi, is a former intelligence officer with the RAAF, who will provide a personal perspective on MND. As you may have noticed in the foyer, there is a display to acknowledge Remembrance Day and people with MND. This display features excerpts from Sport's story, written by Sport's daughter, Marlene Bailey. So Kenneth Elliott Williams, also known as Sport, was an army gunner, and he died 30 years ago of MND. So Marlene and her cousin Neil Francis are here today, so I especially welcome both of you. I'm not sure where you are. Where are you? Oh, up the back. Excellent. Well, welcome. I also acknowledge and welcome everyone here impacted by MND, including families and carers. I understand that some of you have travelled extremely long distances to be here, including places like Canawindra, which I have to admit I don't know where that is. No, Canadra, okay. You can see I'm actually not from New South Wales, so Port Macquarie and Canberra and Shell Harbour. And to the MND researchers, health professionals, MND Australia and state MND Association staff and board members, many who have travelled from interstate like myself. Today at the third MND Connect, we reflect on advances in MND research and care. We are thankful for the generosity of the public, for their donations to MND RAA, which has certainly not only sustained but built MND research over the past 30 years. We also recognise the grit and courage of people living with MND, and we pause to acknowledge the bravery of those like Sport who have fought for the freedom of our country. As you know, MND Connect brings together the community, researchers and clinicians in an interactive forum to discuss MND research. So today is a wonderful opportunity to hear from some of Australia's best and brightest MND experts who will cover an array of topics including finding biomarkers, to clinical trials, to therapies, to care. So I certainly encourage you all to ask questions, make comments, and if you feel a bit inhibited by doing it here, certainly talk to the presenters over lunch. Because today is about people living with MND and your families and friends. The MND experts in this room, together with the research and clinical colleagues from around the country, care advisors, support staff, volunteers, are here for one reason, and that reason is for people living with MND. Research is, in terms of MND experts here today, not only are they, as I said, Australia's brightest, but in my view, I think they're also internationally our brightest, and they continue to work so hard to better understand the causes of the disease, find effective treatments, and ultimately a cure. But as you know, in the meantime, there is care, and that's where MND Australia, particularly through its members of the state MND associations, continue to provide care for people living with MND and provide them with what they need and what they want to live better for longer. There are several people I need to thank, certainly the University of Sydney, who've been very generous in making this venue available today, being on Saturday. The federal government, who've supported a number of you with MND to be here today, and they've also generously covered the costs of the recording. The generous support of the state MND associations and all the donors who have collectively continued to give so generously that provides substantial support for not only our established researchers, but also encourages more young researchers to join or to dedicate their career to MND. And finally, I thank MND Australia Executive Director Research, Stephanie Williams, Rachel Ritz, Kate Simpson, and of course MND New South Wales, who have all worked so tirelessly on top of their already busy day jobs, to develop the program for you today. I know you will learn and share so much today, and again, I encourage you to ask questions. So I'll now hand over to Professor Matthew Keenan, who's chair of the MNDRA Research Committee, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thanks, David, and I'd like to extend a welcome to everyone here as well. This is actually my home campus, so I work as a neurologist at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital and through the University of Sydney. So this is actually Australia's oldest university, and prior to the University of Sydney, it was a place of teaching and learning for the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And in fact, so the Charles Perkins Centre, very unexpectedly, a person came off the street and had a package wrapped in brown paper, and it was opened up and it was a Picasso painting. And so it was flown over to Christie's in London and it was auctioned off for £30 million. And that came back to the University of Sydney, and that was the bequest that really led to the building of the Charles Perkins Centre and this auditorium. And it was to acknowledge the first Indigenous Australian who had graduated from the University of Sydney. So David mentioned the MND Research Institute of Australia, and I hope that everyone got this as they came in. So the MND RIA also has very humble beginnings, which began actually in an office here at the University of Sydney in the Blackburn building, which was the medical faculty. And from there, it gradually built up a little bit of, from Clive Harper, who was a professor of pathology. Some clinicians got involved, and then it was thought that it was best to try and make it a national approach. And the first chair of MND-RIA was David Burke, and then from David Burke to Perry Bartlett and Ed Byrne. Ed Byrne was in Melbourne, Perry Bartlett in Brisbane, and Dominic Rowe through, at that stage, Royal North Shore and Macquarie, and now myself. And over the years, it's really built up. The first grant was given out in 1987, and we spent all day on Thursday going through the various applications that had come into MND-RIA, and we were able to give out $3.312 million to sustain and grow research across Australia. So I think it's really a fantastic story, and many of the great highlights over the last 30 years are included here, and we've seen people go from humble research assistants to professors around Australia, and it's really built up a workforce as well as being at the cutting edge of understanding really what motor neurone disease is. And so one of the first recipients was Garth Nicholson, who was looking into the genetics of motor neurone disease, and then from his work going around Australia, understanding, connecting families together and taking blood samples, that led to the first genetic discovery, superoxide dismutase mutation in motor neurone disease, which was published in 1993. And then one of Garth's students, Ian Blair, has gone on to take it to another level, and he's been instrumental in understanding some of the newer genes with motor neurone disease, FUS, fused-in sarcoma, and C9orf. So a lot of this has really been driven from Australia. Look, I think without any further ado, I'd like to start moving through the program, and it's a great pleasure to introduce Lynda Legradi. So Lynda was diagnosed with motor neurone disease in 2016. She lives in Shellharbour with her husband Les and 17-year-old daughter. She previously worked as an intelligence officer with the Royal Australian Air Force from 1995 to 2001, and then took up work as a secondary school teacher until her diagnosis in 2016. Lynda is very highly regarded, and I asked people about Lynda, and they said she's full of energy and beans. And I talked to the multidisciplinary care staff who were involved with looking after Lynda, and they said she's very smart. So Lynda, could I call you up? Julie, this is a lapel microphone or this?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all here. My family history is very strong with MND, so I'm hoping to give people with sporadic MND a little bit of, hopefully, some more insight. Sorry, I'm quite loud. I went online and I found that lovely graphic of brain activity. I like to see the brain as a very lively part of our body, and I would like to find a time when we can say jump start it like we can a car and get it to operate correctly. Okay, so I was asked to go through my life before diagnosis, the diagnosis process and how it was for us, and life since diagnosis. This was quite an interesting thing for me to do because there's been very little difference for me. There hasn't been a time in my life that I can remember not knowing about it. My family, particularly my mum, spoke very openly about the death of her father, and at the time that he died in 1962, while he was well aware that he was passing away of the same illness that afflicted his brothers and sisters and his parents' generation and backwards, there wasn't really a diagnosis for him. As a family, we heard things like muscular dystrophy. We were given, it's this, so we thought, okay, so we've got that, and then it was something else. And we really remember very clearly when we finally knew motor neurone was the culprit. Yeah, so I've always had that coin going. It was like she would say, I could get it, you could get it, your kids could get it, because that's how family passed. So I'll just go through some of the people. Okay, so that lovely stately lady sitting in the chair is my great-grandmother, Eliza Elkin. She brought motor neurone disease into our family. It's very hard going back through family histories, looking at death certificates, trying to ascertain the descriptions they're using in the 1950s, whether you can say she passed away from motor neurone disease. That's her son, my grandfather, Fred. He passed away in 1962. He had bulbar palsy form of the disease. That's my mum. She passed away in 2001, only diagnosed 4 months before she passed away. I think we thought because she got to the age of 70 that she was quite through that process. She'd skipped out, and of course I was having a little party for myself. Yeah, but then she started to slur, and we knew it was bulbar palsy, and she had a little bit of frontotemporal dementia with that. So that's my sister Sue and me. Bit of an age gap, yeah, but my mum said I was planned, okay? No comments, thanks. And yeah, she passed away 4 years ago, I guess, and she had typical ALS, progressing slightly differently for her than for me. Yeah, we're 15 years apart, and we have 2 other genetic brothers in the family, and they're in that zone at the moment in their 60s. Haven't seen any symptoms yet, although I think one of my brothers is losing it. Okay, so that's probably big enough for you to see. Okay, so I'm into genealogy, and I've given all this information to the Forefront Clinic, but that's the path you can see from Eliza to Fred to Betty to me. Okay, so if I step back from Eliza, I get William Elkin, and the Elkin family came to New Zealand from Ireland and then moved to Australia. but I have to go back a bit further, and I'll come back to this later. And on the right-hand side, that's also from Ireland. So I had to look into the Lynn family, and the Henderson family, and the Gray family. Okay, so my diagnosis. All right, so because of the family history and because of what I know about the disease, I knew I was ill for a while. But while I could hide those symptoms from my family, because anybody with a chronic illness knows that a lot of being ill is about managing the impact on the people around you in your family and among your friends. The diagnosis pathway was very quick for me because I was very forceful at pushing my way past the GP to a neurologist and past the initial neurologist into testing and so forth. And it was interesting to me to work out what the tests were actually showing about my body, what the medical information the tests were searching for. And I had 3 neurologists actually come together to make a most likely motor neurone disease based on my family history diagnosis. And so it was more an academic process for me. I didn't have any fear, I guess, is the big thing I don't have with my family history. It's not unexpected that the coin fell this way for me. I did play the odds a bit. You know, if you think of horses, you think, okay, so, or lightning. You go, okay, well, my sister's gone. It can be one of my brothers. Maybe my brother will get it. Maybe it won't be me, you know, but that's the way it works. Okay, so I have typical ALS, so I'm slowly getting more paralysed. I'm always watching out for any cognitive impairment, so any dementia coming in there, although I'm a pretty eccentric person, so it's a bit hard to tell. I'm always looking for new sources of entertainment, and why is the content on Netflix so crap? Why, you know? But then I think at least I have Netflix. When my sister was sick, there was no Netflix. Okay? I'm always educating other people, even some people in the medical profession. I come up sometimes against, and there's nothing wrong with allied services such as physiotherapy and so forth, coming from a rehabilitation point of view. There's no way of exercising you out of any injury you sustain. You have to rest and let your body recover from it. I'm trying to eliminate all toxins and poisons in products, all chemicals and things like that, shampoos and things you use on your body, but it's harder than you think. And they change the names of these things all the time. You need a chemical directory that you can look things up and work out where they come from. Okay, and this is especially to those people with sporadic MND. Take the easy way. Manage your fatigue. Don't push yourself. Walking with a walker when it takes all your strength. Just sit in a chair when you've got a big day out. And then you've got your energy when you come home. And you're nicer to people. You're nicer to your family when you're not tired. Okay, so the importance of research for my family. Obviously, with genetically inherited MND, that same coin spins over a lot more heads as time progresses, because from Eliza, from her parents, when she was around, that was, people were routinely having 10 kids, 13 kids, you know. And those kids have had kids, and those kids have had kids, and those kids have had kids. Okay, so that's Mum. That's my sister Sue and my brother Peter and Dennis. Okay, so there's coins there. That's Sue's family. That's her beautiful kids. This is an old photo. We've got a psychologist in the little blue dress. We've got a policeman on my sister's lap, and we've got a miner farming guy on his father's lap. Coins over their heads. That beautiful little flower girl, the coins over her head. That beautiful little girl with her dad, the coin is over their head. Another beautiful little girl, the coin is over her head. That's my beautiful girl, the coin is over her head. And I like research. Sorry, that's my fun graphic for TMS. I love the magnet. It's not normal, I know that, but I love that pounding feeling in my brain. So the things that I do at Forefront here at the University of Sydney, TMS, which I just spoke about, nerve conduction happens. I've done a blink rate study. I like to have long naps in the MRI, but apparently I move when I'm asleep in the MRI and they don't like that. Cognitive testing, just to check the brain. I did score very highly in remembering a series of numbers and repeating them in reverse, but I despise maths. So explain that. I probably should like it a lot more. I've been part of an ultrasound study. I take part in longitudinal, so over time studies, and snapshot studies, so one-off, let's see how it works for people with MND. And when you take part in study days, you get this really nice lunch, okay, down at a place called The Store, there in Camperdown. Who serves spiced chickpeas for breakfast, you know? At the Anzac Research Centre in Concord in the past, we've been sending our family's been sending genetic material and family history information to the research team there. And the DNA of multiple members of my family has helped identify some of the genes that Professor Kiernan spoke about. Often people with MND get asked, has your daughter been tested? Like if you've got it, did your daughter get tested? And I always look at them and go, what's the point of finding out at the age of 17 that you have a currently incurable, untreatable disease? That's not beneficial for her, and it's a coin that's spinning. She may not get MND. What I like to look at is to see if I can trace the ethnicity of my ancestors back to a single population. And what I've managed to find out about these people is that the Elkin surname is one of the traditional Jewish names, and they came to Ireland from Russia in the time of the pogroms and settled in Ireland some 500 years ago. The Gray surname, every culture on earth has Gray as a surname. Not happy with that outcome. The Lynn and the Henderson names are both Scottish. Okay? So I'm always interested in other people with MND where we can find common territory. If we all take part in research, we could soon get the best news ever. So for the doctors here, there's a bit of Latin. Anyone want to have a go? While I breathe, I hope. Thank you.